In the quiet tunnel beneath Brooklyn, she was never truly alone. Something waited in the darkness. Something that reacted to every heartbeat, every tear, every moment of love. Stay with me, you must see how this ends. And if these words touch your heart, please subscribe. This channel exists for stories like this. And for people like you. The train doors slid open with a metallic groan. A rush of cold underground air swept against Ethan's face. He stepped inside the Brooklyn-bound subway car and felt the faint tremor of the tracks beneath his shoes. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, then steadied with a low electric hum. He noticed her again. The same girl from the past few weeks. Sitting by the window with a worn paperback resting in her hands. Her hair shifted with every passing burst of wind from the tunnel. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest, a strange mix of excitement and unease. He moved closer, gripping the overhead rail as the train lurched forward. The scent of old steel and warm paper drifted in the air. A distant busker's violin echoed through the connecting cars, soft and shaky. Ethan watched her fingers turn a page. Then he saw it. Her book slipped from her hands in slow motion, bouncing once on the grimy floor. The sound cracked through the quiet like something breaking. He bent down to pick it up, but the train suddenly jerked hard to the left. His balance vanished. His shoulder slammed into the metal pole. A flash of pain shot down his arm. The lights flickered again, longer this time, bathing the car in a strange dim glow. The other passengers lifted their heads, silent and alert. Ethan reached out for the book, but his hand stopped midway. A chilling cold swept across his fingertips. It felt as if someone had exhaled right across his skin. He looked around. No one was close enough to breathe on him. The book lay on its spine, pages fluttering although the air was still. A deep rumble echoed through the tunnel, lower and heavier than the usual train noise. The girl's eyes widened as she stared past Ethan's shoulder. Not at him. Not at the book. But at something behind him. He turned slowly, his heartbeat thudding hard against his ribs. The shadows near the far corner of the car seemed darker than before. Too dark for the weak lights overhead. A shape shifted inside the darkness. Ethan felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise as the rumble grew louder, shaking the metal floor beneath his feet. The train began to slow, though no station was anywhere near this part of the route. The passengers leaned forward, confused. The girl whispered something, barely audible, her voice trembling. Ethan stepped back, keeping his eyes on the moving shadow as the subway car filled with a rising heavy silence that pressed against his ears. Then the lights flickered once more, brighter than before, almost white, and when they dimmed again, the shadow had grown taller. The shadow rose until it almost brushed the ceiling of the subway car. Ethan felt a heavy pressure settle on his chest, as if the air had thickened into something solid. The train continued to slow, groaning through the darkness of the tunnel, metal grinding against metal with a painful shriek. The passengers clutched the poles. Someone whispered a nervous prayer. Someone else covered their mouth to hold back a cry. Ethan did not blink. He could not. His eyes burned with fear, curiosity, and something else he could not name. The girl's voice trembled again. "Do not move." Her shaking hands gripped the edge of her seat, knuckles turning white. The shadow drifted forward, sliding along the wall as if it had no weight. The air grew colder. Ethan's breath shivered in front of him, a faint mist swirling like smoke. His heart pounded hard enough to echo in his ears. A strange ringing filled his head, gentle at first, then sharper, like a warning no one could explain. The girl finally stood. Her knees trembled, but her gaze locked onto the growing darkness as if she recognized it, as if she feared it, as if she had seen it before. Ethan stepped closer to her without thinking, his arm brushing hers. A sudden warmth spread through him at the touch, a fragile contrast to the freezing air around them. She looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. "Do you feel it too?" Her voice quivered, breaking on the last word. Ethan nodded, although every part of him wished it was not real. A deep metallic groan rolled through the tunnel again. The entire train vibrated. Something inside the shadow shifted, like a figure trapped behind smoke. It leaned forward. Ethan felt its attention on him, heavy and suffocating. It was not a person. It was not anything that belonged in the world he understood. A delicate sound floated through the stillness. The violin from the distant busker. Soft at first, then clearer. A slow, trembling melody that carried a strange sadness, as if the music itself remembered something tragic. The shadow paused, almost listening. The girl gripped Ethan's hand. Her fingers were cold and shaking, but her hold was desperate, grounding him in the moment. He felt her fear, but also her strength beneath it. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "It follows me." Ethan turned toward her, stunned. Her eyes glistened with tears she fought to contain. "It has followed me for months," she said with trembling breath. "Every time I ride this train. Every time I reach this part of the tunnel. Every time I feel a moment of peace." Her voice cracked on the last word. Ethan's mind raced. 1,000 questions. 1,000 fears. But the sight of her shaking, the weight of her trembling hand in his, silenced everything. The shadow pulsed, expanding and shrinking as if it breathed. The lights flickered again, each flash revealing more shape inside the darkness. Face, not fully clear, pale, and hollow. Eyes like empty windows staring through him, searching for something he did not understand. The violin played faster, more urgent, its notes slicing through the suffocating quiet. The girl stepped closer to Ethan, pressing her shoulder against his arm. Fear radiated off her body like heat, but she did not let go of his hand. Ethan felt a fierce protectiveness rise inside him, surprising him with its intensity. He squeezed her hand gently. "I am here," he said softly. Her breath shook. For a moment, the fear in her eyes softened into something fragile and deeply human. Connection. Silent plea. A longing for safety she had not felt in a long time. The shadow drifted closer. The temperature dropped again, so cold that Ethan's fingertips felt numb. His pulse throbbed painfully in his throat. The train screeched louder, almost desperate, as if trying to outrun something that held it back. The girl's voice broke the silence again, softer this time, filled with emotion she tried to hide. "It always moves when I feel something real," she whispered. A tear slid down her cheek. "When I feel happy, when I feel hope, when I feel close to someone." Her eyes lifted to Ethan's. The shadow shifted again, drawing nearer, responding to her words. Ethan's chest tightened with fear and confusion, but also something impossibly tender. He did not know her last name. He did not know her story. But he felt the weight of her loneliness, sharp and devastating, as if she carried a fear she never asked for. The violin's melody grew heavy, almost mournful, filling the subway car with aching beauty. The shadow leaned forward, stretching across the floor like a living storm. The passengers shrank back. Some cried quietly. Some held on to strangers just to feel another heartbeat. The girl stepped closer to Ethan until their shoulders touched fully. Her voice cracked. "I think it wants me to be alone." Ethan swallowed hard, his throat tight. He shook his head slowly. "You are not alone." Her breath hitched at the words. The shadow froze. The tunnel groaned again. The lights dimmed to a faint glow. Something inside the darkness twisted, reacting sharply to the simple truth Ethan had spoken. The girl's fingers tightened around his. Her eyes shimmered with a raw mixture of fear and relief. But the shadow kept growing, reaching, spreading. The violin cried louder, its notes trembling with warning and heartbreak, echoing off the metal walls as the train shuddered deep beneath the city. And the shadow leaned closer, as if ready to reveal the reason it had followed her for so long. The shadow leaned forward until its edges trembled like smoke straining against an unseen pull. Ethan felt the temperature plunge again, a deep cold that crawled into his bones and made the air feel sharp in his lungs. The train rattled violently, as if it struggled to keep moving through the tunnel. Passengers clung to the poles with shaking hands. Their breaths formed pale clouds that drifted upward before dissolving into the dim air. The violin's melody grew frantic now, each note twisting with urgency, echoing through the subway car like a cry for help. Ethan stepped slightly in front of the girl as the darkness stretched toward them. His legs trembled, but he held his ground. The shadow rolled upward, forming a tall, wavering outline that flickered with every pulse of the unsteady lights. The girl's voice cracked as she whispered behind him. "It reacts to emotion. It senses when my heart feels anything. It grows when I am afraid. It grows when I care." Her words broke something inside him. He turned his head slightly, just enough to see her trembling form behind him. Her hair trembled with every shaking breath. Her eyes held a storm of fear, sadness, and a desperate longing for safety. Ethan felt a crushing heaviness in his chest. He could feel her loneliness like a physical weight pressing into the air between them. He had seen her every morning on this train. He had watched her sit alone, tucked into her book as if the world outside was something she was afraid to touch. Now he understood why. The violin softened for a moment, its melody stretching into a thin, aching line that sounded almost like a memory. The shadow turned toward the girl, its hollow face shifting slightly, as if it recognized her emotions, as if it fed on them. The air thickened. Ethan felt something in the darkness observing him too, testing him, searching through him as if it wanted to know how deeply he felt. His heart hammered harder. He felt an instinctive fear that the shadow would grow stronger if it sensed the rising panic inside him. He forced air into his lungs, steady and slow. He steadied his shaking hand around the girl's fingers. Her grip tightened back, desperate and pleading. Her voice shook. "I never wanted to feel anything for anyone. Every time I did, this thing returned. Every time I tried to move forward. Every time I tried to be close to someone. It always came back for me." A tear slipped from her eye and traced a slow path down her cheek. The shadow swelled immediately, reacting to her sorrow. The lights dimmed again. Ethan's pulse pounded so loudly he could barely hear the violin. He stepped closer to her, placing himself between her and the advancing darkness. His voice trembled, but he forced the words out. "You do not deserve to be haunted for feeling something real." Her breath caught. Her eyes widened with a fragile mixture of surprise and pain, as if his words reached a part of her that had been silent for too long. The shadow jerked sharply, its edges twisting like a creature in distress. The train cars groaned again, the lights humming with a low electrical warning. The girl stepped even closer to Ethan, her forehead almost touching his shoulder. The warmth of her presence pressed against him, soft and trembling. A surge of fierce protectiveness rose in Ethan, stronger than his fear. The shadow moved again, closer. He felt a cold wind sweep through the train, strong enough to sway the hanging straps. The passengers moaned softly, covering their ears as the air vibrated with tension. The violin's melody fractured into sharp, broken notes, as if the music itself was losing strength. Ethan stared into the dark figure, trying to see the shape behind the smoke. A faint outline of shoulders, a fading suggestion of arms, a face that looked almost human but empty, drained, as if every emotion had been stripped away long ago. A sudden realization froze Ethan's breath. This thing was not simply following the girl. It was tied to her, bonded in some way he did not understand. Perhaps created by something she had endured. Something she had carried alone for far too long. The girl's voice broke again, raw and painful. "I am afraid it wants to take joy from me. I am afraid it wants to erase every feeling I have." Her shoulders shook. She looked at Ethan with eyes filled with exhaustion and a desperate wish to be free. His heart cracked at the sight. He felt her pain so sharply that it became his own. He squeezed her hand again. Her breath hitched. The shadow flinched. A low rumble shook the train. The violin swelled again, sorrowful and haunting, filling the air with trembling emotion. The shadow twisted violently, reacting to the rising intensity between Ethan and the girl. Their fear. Their connection. Their fragile hope. It leaned closer, its hollow face tilting as if trying to understand the bond forming between them. The girl gasped, stepping nearer to Ethan, almost instinctively seeking his presence. He felt every inch of her trembling frame. He felt her trust despite the terror surrounding them. The shadow expanded, reaching for them with a trembling darkness that shivered like smoke caught in a storm. The lights flickered so wildly that one overhead bulb burst with a sharp pop, showering faint sparks down the aisle. Passengers screamed. The train screeched as if grinding against stone. The tunnel vibrated with a growing roar. Ethan lifted his free hand, placing it gently on the girl's shoulder. Her breath quivered under his touch. Her eyes lifted to him, filled with fear and something deeper, something she had been afraid to feel. A fragile spark that the shadow clearly sensed. The darkness twisted faster now, pulled toward her emotions like a tide dragged by a violent moon. The violin cried out with a trembling high note, vibrating through the very floor of the train. The shadow surged forward, stretching toward them, its edges tearing through the cold air as if ready to reveal the truth behind its haunting presence. The shadow surged forward, stretching toward them with a growing urgency that felt almost desperate. Its darkness rippled across the subway floor like a living tide. The remaining lights flickered again, washing the scene in pale flashes that revealed fear on every face inside the car. The violin's melody trembled with frantic intensity, its notes shaking as if the instrument itself feared what was coming. Ethan stepped closer to the girl, keeping her behind him. His breath came out slow, unsteady, clouding the air before him. The shadow twisted, bending around the seats and poles, its form pulsing with an uneven rhythm, as if battling against some force within itself. The girl gripped Ethan's hand with a strength born from fear and longing. Her voice cracked softly. "It reacts more when I feel safe. It hates when I feel hope." Ethan turned slightly, meeting her trembling eyes. Their closeness made his heartbeat surge with a painful mixture of fear and tenderness. The shadow paused, sensing the emotional charge between them like a predator tasting the air before a strike. A deep hum rolled through the tunnel walls, vibrating the floor beneath their feet. Dust fell from the ceiling, drifting down like snow. The passengers leaned away from the darkness, whispering prayers, covering their mouths, cowering behind seats. The girl took a shaky breath and spoke again, her voice barely audible. "This thing was not always like this. It was small once, faint shape I barely noticed. It grew every time I tried to trust someone, every time I needed someone, every time I tried to love." Her voice cracked on the last word, and the shadow flared instantly, its form swelling upward. A wave of cold swept through the car, stinging their skin. Ethan felt her flinch and instinctively placed his arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer. Her breath caught at the sudden comfort, and her trembling eased for a brief heartbeat. That single moment of warmth sent another violent pulse through the shadow. It rushed forward, its dark mass shivering with emotion it could not contain. The lights dimmed to a thin, trembling glow. The violin sang a long, sorrowful note that echoed through the car with a heartbreaking beauty. Ethan stared into the thickening darkness, feeling its attention coil around him. A faint outline of a face emerged again, shifting through the smoke. It was clearer now, eyes shaped by emptiness. A hollow expression formed by shadows that felt both ancient and familiar. As if it did not exist to harm but to remind, to echo, to consume. The girl tightened her grip on Ethan, her voice barely a breath. "It knows I am not alone anymore." A trembling honesty lay beneath her fear. Her words held a fragile confession, unspoken yet painfully clear. Ethan felt the weight of her vulnerability settle into his chest. She had spent so long fighting something she never understood. So long trying to silence her own feelings to keep the darkness away. Now she stood trembling by his side, terrified and hopeful in the same breath. The shadow expanded again, dark tendrils lifting from the floor like reaching hands. The passengers gasped and pressed themselves back against their seats. The train screeched loudly, sparks flying from somewhere beneath the car as if the metal itself struggled under a crushing force. The violin's melody twisted into a desperate cry, its notes trembling with raw fear and sorrow. Ethan tightened his arm around the girl, moving her further behind him. Her forehead brushed his shoulder, and her breath trembled against his arm. He felt her fear. He felt her trust. He felt her hope fighting to survive beneath the weight of a lifetime of loneliness. The shadow jerked violently, as if the raw emotion between them sent shockwaves through its form. Ethan lifted his chin, eyes locked on the twisting darkness. If this thing reacted to emotion, if it grew when the girl felt something deep, if it was connected to her in ways she never understood, then it was reacting to the bond forming between them. The bond she feared. The bond she tried to silence. Ethan took a shaky step forward, still holding her hand behind him. The shadow reeled back slightly, its form rippling like disturbed water. Another step. The darkness flickered. The girl gasped behind him, her fingers shaking around his. "Ethan, please do not." Her voice broke before she could finish. He looked over his shoulder at her, and the raw emotion in her eyes carved straight into his heart. Fear. Hope. Pain. Longing. He squeezed her hand gently. Her breath trembled. The lights flickered violently, casting long shadows that twisted along the walls. The shadow hissed, its form shaking with an emotion that Ethan could not translate. Anger. Fear. Jealousy. Or something far older. He stepped closer still. The darkness wavered as if torn between hunger and hesitation. The violin screamed a trembling note, filling the car with a haunting, trembling echo. Ethan felt the ground vibrate beneath him. The girl pressed against the back of his arm, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. The shadow bent forward, inches away now, its hollow face shifting through swirling smoke. Ethan stared into the empty eyes, feeling an overwhelming wave of cold crash across his body. The girl gasped sharply as the darkness reached toward them both, trembling violently, as if about to reveal the reason it had followed her. The darkness reached toward them, its trembling form expanding with a strange, painful urgency, as if something inside it struggled to break free. The temperature dropped again, sharper than before, almost biting against their skin. The subway car vibrated with a deep, steady rumble, like a heartbeat buried inside the metal walls. Passengers pressed themselves against their seats, eyes wide, breaths shallow, bodies frozen in a silent plea to remain unseen. The violin's trembling cry shivered through the entire car, notes bending with fear and grief, echoing like ghosts in the steel corridors. Ethan stood firmly in front of the girl, shielding her with his body. Her fingertips clung to his hand with trembling desperation, as if letting go would leave her defenseless in the gripping cold. The shadow leaned closer, its hollow face forming fully for the first time. Shaped like wounds, a mouth formed from smoke, a face carved from emotion, not flesh. Ethan felt something sharp twist in his chest as he stared into that emptiness. It was not hate he saw. It was sorrow, old suffocating sorrow. Sorrow that felt familiar to the girl behind him. She gasped softly, knowing it too. Her voice trembled. "It looks different now." The shadow jerked violently at her voice, as if her recognition caused it pain. Her breath cracked. Her tears fell faster. Ethan felt her step closer, her forehead brushing between his shoulder blades, her presence trembling with fear and something deeper. He felt her pain pulse through her grip, a silent cry she had never spoken aloud. The train lurched suddenly, metal grinding with a harsh scream that echoed through the tunnel. The shadow snapped its head toward the ceiling, its form shaking as if torn between revealing something and hiding it. The violin melody shifted again, softer now, fragile, as if pleading with the darkness. The girl whispered behind him, her voice breaking like thin glass. "I think it knows what I feel. I think it always knew." Ethan turned slightly, watching her through the corner of his eye. Her eyes glistened with fear and heartbreak. She looked at him as if seeing a lifeline she never believed she would have. The shadow shuddered again, reacting violently to the bond in her gaze. Ethan stepped forward, and the darkness recoiled slightly, as if unsure of him. He felt a strange strength rise inside his chest, born from the need to protect her, to hold back the darkness that had followed her for so long. He spoke softly. "Tell me what it wants." Her breath trembled. Her voice wavered. "It wants my silence. It wants my isolation. It wants to keep me from feeling anything real." The words shook her entire body. Her tears hit the floor like tiny echoes of the pain she carried alone. The shadow pulsed at her confession, growing taller, darker, heavier. The floor under their feet quivered. The passengers whimpered softly, trapped in the same nightmare, unable to understand the force pulling at the air. Ethan felt the girl's grip tighten further, almost painful now. Her body pressed against his arm, trembling with every breath. The closeness stirred something fierce inside him, an ache that collided with fear and compassion. He stepped even closer to the shadow, meeting its hollow gaze head-on. It shivered violently. The darkness twisted around him like a confused storm, reacting to something in him that it did not understand. He felt the cold reach toward his chest, brushing through him like icy fingers searching for weakness. The girl cried out, pulling him back. "Please stop. It reacts to your strength. It reacts when you care about me." Her voice broke on the last words. Ethan felt something collapse inside him. She was terrified of losing him, terrified that her emotions would destroy everything she touched. He turned fully toward her, cupping his free hand gently around her trembling arms. Her breath hitched, her eyes filled with breaking emotion. She had lived with the belief that she was dangerous to love, that her heart brought shadows, that caring would summon darkness. The shadow froze, sensing the truth rising between them. Ethan stepped closer, pressing his forehead to hers, their breaths trembling together in the flickering light. Her tears touched his skin, warm and fragile. The shadow shrieked silently. The violin screamed a desperate note. The lights flickered so violently that sparks burst from a ceiling panel. Passengers cried out. The entire subway car shook. The girl whispered in a voice full of breaking hope, "Ethan, I do not want to be afraid anymore." Her words rippled through the air like a pulse of light cutting through fog. The shadow convulsed violently, its form tearing at the edges, almost splitting. A distant roar echoed through the tunnel, louder than anything before. The darkness surged again, reaching for her, trembling with a wild and tormented intensity. She clung to Ethan, burying her face against his chest, her tears staining his shirt. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her as tightly as he dared, grounding her against the cold that clawed at them. The shadow leaned forward, its face inches from them, shaking uncontrollably. For the first time, Ethan saw something buried deep inside the empty eyes. Flicker. Memory. A wound. Something tied to her pain. The girl felt it too. Her breath broke into a sob. Her knees weakened. The shadow reached out slowly, trembling, as if about to reveal the truth of what it had always been. The shadow trembled inches away from them, its hollow eyes shaking with a strange intensity, as if the moment itself dragged it toward a truth it had hidden for too long. Ethan held the girl close, his arms steady around her trembling frame, her breath warm against his chest as the cold wind of the darkness fought to pull her back. The lights flickered again, weaker now, as if the train itself waited for what would happen next. The violin's melody softened into a gentle cry, no longer frantic but sorrowful, as if it understood that the story was reaching a moment that would change everything. The shadow leaned closer. It reached its trembling hand of smoke toward the girl's cheek. She looked up, tears shining, her voice fragile and breaking. "Why have you followed me? Why do you take everything from my heart?" The shadow paused, its shape rippling, almost recoiling from the pain in her voice. Then something happened, something no one expected. The shadow placed its trembling hand upon its own chest, fingers swirling through its dark form. And the girl gasped. Ethan saw it too. A flicker of a faint, broken light deep inside the darkness. A light shaped like a memory. A fragment of someone the girl once cared for. Someone she lost. Someone whose pain she carried alone, buried deep inside her heart. The shadow was born from her grief, her silence, her fear of loving again. It had grown from the ache she never allowed herself to heal. The girl's knees weakened, her voice breaking. It was never here to hurt me. It came because I was hurting myself. The shadow's trembling stopped. Its empty eyes softened, flickering with a faint reflection of the girl's sorrow. The cold air around them eased slightly, as if the darkness itself felt relief at finally being understood. Ethan wiped the tears from her cheek with gentle fingers. "You are not alone anymore," he whispered in steady warmth. She leaned into him, her breath shaking, her heart finally speaking without fear. "I want to feel again," she said softly. "I want to trust again. I want to live again." The shadow shivered violently. Its form began to dissolve, edges drifting upward like smoke carried by a gentle wind. For the first time, the darkness did not seem frightening. It seemed tired. It seemed ready to let go. The violin played a single long, aching note that filled the car like a farewell. The girl stepped toward the shadow, tears falling freely, her voice trembling with compassion. "Thank you. But I must set you free now." The shadow bowed its head. A silent acknowledgement. "Goodbye." Then it lifted its smoky face toward her one last time. Its hollow eyes glimmered with the faintest reflection of the girl's healing heart. And slowly, with the softness of a sigh, the shadow dissolved into the air. The cold faded. The light steadied. The train surged forward through the tunnel as if released from a heavy weight. Silence filled the car. A silence not of fear, but of peace. The passengers exhaled, some wiping tears, some whispering relief. The girl collapsed into Ethan's arms, her body trembling not from fear, but from release. He held her close, brushing her hair gently, letting her heart settle against his. She whispered with fragile hope, "I feel light for the first time in years." Ethan smiled softly, resting his forehead against hers. "You deserve to feel whole again." The tunnel lights flashed across their faces as the train moved toward the next station, carrying them into a future no longer haunted by shadows. A future filled with healing, connection, and the fragile, beautiful possibility of love. The girl lifted her eyes to Ethan's, filled with gratitude and a newfound courage that shone brighter than the flickering lights. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying, for seeing me, for not letting me face my darkness alone." Ethan squeezed her hands gently, feeling her warmth for the very first time without the cold behind it. "I will stay as long as you want me to," he said. And for the first time, she smiled with a heart free from fear. As the train arrived at the next stop, the doors opened, letting in warm city air. A new beginning waited for them just beyond the platform. A beginning she finally felt brave enough to step into. And she stepped forward with Ethan beside her, their hands still intertwined, leaving the shadows behind in the dim tunnel of Brooklyn. If you enjoyed this emotional and suspenseful story, do not forget to subscribe to my channel. Your support helps me bring more heart-touching, dramatic, and unforgettable stories just for you.